problems for the online course, right? But this is just paying attention to some of the problems that are located in 1.3, where we're telling what type of arguments, right, these things are. So let me go over, share my screen, and we'll talk about some of these, right? Okay. So in the 1.3 homework, we need to be able to identify, right? So here's what we're asked to do. Determine whether the following arguments are best interpreted as being inductive or deductive. Also, state the criteria you use in reaching your decision, the presence of indicator words, the nature of the inferential link between the premises, the conclusion, or the character or form of argumentation. So it's a bit open, right? But we need to be able to recall all the different types of inductive argument versus deductive, right? So in this chapter. So I usually try to avoid the 1s and the 4s and the 7s, right? But I think this one is particularly good just to illustrate one particular form. So so let's do number 1 together. Because triangle A is congruent with triangle B, right? And the word congruent means identically same as. And triangle A is isosceles, it follows that triangle B is isosceles. Now, you don't even need to know what an isosceles triangle is. If A and B are identical and all their parts are identical with the word congruent, would it necessarily imply that triangle B is isosceles and true by necessity? Or are we using reasoning by probability? What do you think? Pause to consider. That's right. This is a deductive argument that demonstrates the mathematical truth of triangle A and B being the same. It would necessarily imply that triangle B is isosceles. And it is an example of, pause to consider. Yes, that's argument by mathematics, right? Let me just tell my wife that I'm recording a video. Okay. Recording video. No dings, please. Okay, so the second one is called, the second argument. The plaque on the Leaning Tower of Pisa says that Galileo performed experiments there with falling objects. It must be the case that Galileo did indeed perform those experiments there. Don't think about it too much. So, do you have anything here that indicates that this is either deductive or inductive? Remember, deductive is reasoning by necessity, and inductive is reasoning by probability. So there are some words that might help us determine, right? They're not necessarily just like the indicators for premises and conclusions, right? So what do you think? Pause to consider. If you said that must be is an indicator of probability, then yes, this is an inductive argument, right? And it's probably true, right? And what type of inductive argument is it? Did you notice the second word? Pause to consider. Yes, it's argument based on signs, right? Now it's improbable that the torus attraction, like that people have put up false information on a sign, but because human beings could be right or wrong about what they put on the sign, there's nothing about necessity in number 2, right? So there you go. Number 3 is a really good one too. Let's do that one. The rainfall in Seattle has been more than 15 inches every year for the past 30 years. Therefore, the rainfall next year will probably be more than 15 inches. Now, hopefully you're automatically picking up on the word that I want you to pick up on, right? But is there any level of necessity that the rainfall next year will be more than 15 inches? No. It's based on probability, right? It has the word probably in it. So if it's got the word probably in it, then it's probably an inductive argument. So what type of inductive argument is number 3? Pause to consider. That's right. It's argument based on prediction, right? That the past will immediately conform to the future. Let us pay attention to number 4. No email messages are eloquent creations, premise 1. Premise 2, some love letters are eloquent creations. Therefore, some love letters are not email messages. So this is one of the only few examples that's actually here. Did you find whether or not it's deductive or inductive? Pause to consider. Yes, that's right. It is deductive, right? And we haven't actually seen categorical syllogisms yet. We actually in the next part of the course after we do fallacies, all right? But the definition of a categorical syllogism is that the words all, no, or some are used in the beginning and that they have 2 premises and a conclusion. That for right now is our working definition for 1.3. Number 5. Amoco, Exxon, and Texaco are all listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It must be the case that all major oil companies are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, is there any language here that suggests to you that this is deductive versus inductive? Pause to consider. Yes, that's right. This is an inductive argument. So notice that we went from a sample of 1, 2, and 3. So we have a sample of 3 oil companies, American oil companies, and then we generalized to the whole, all major American oil companies. So what uses a representative sample size and then generalizes to the point of all based on examples of a few? Pause to consider. Yes, that's right. This is actually generalization, right? This is inductive. We've seen things like 6. We haven't seen something like 7. So let's go to 7. Paying off terrorists in exchange for hostages is not a wise policy, since such action will only lead to take more hostages in the future. Now, what's the conclusion here? Do we have any indicator words that give us whether or not the first sentence is a premise or conclusion, or about the second sentence? Pause to consider. Yes, the word since is a premise indicator, right? So such action will only lead to take. I'm going to pause that. Take that back. No. The word since is not a reliable indicator for us, right? So paying off terrorists. No, it is the premise. Yeah. So paying off terrorists will lead to them taking more hostages in the future. Conclusion, paying off terrorists in exchange for hostages is not a wise policy. I'm screwing this up. I'm sorry, I'm a little tired. But is there a level of necessity between paying off terrorists and then whether or not it'll be for the future, right? So paying off terrorists in exchange for hostages is not a wise policy. Premise 1. Conclusion, such action will lead to them to take more hostages in the future. That's actually the structure of the argument, right? So, and then since is not actually reliable here for that reason. But what type of reasoning is this? In class discussion, a lot of students have a problem with number 7. It's important that you identify a thing that we haven't talked about. So is there a level of necessity between, if you pay them off, will more hostages be taken in the future? Maybe, maybe not, right? So there's not a level of necessity here. But what we pay attention to here is the fact that, so what is it? So we're in the direction of induction, but what type of inductive argument is it? Pause to consider. Yes, it's causal reasoning. It's saying that here is a cause that will lead to this effect, right? Now, inductive reasoning about cause and effect relationships can go both ways. They can go from the cause to the effect or the effect to the cause, right? And sometimes premises can look like conclusions. Conclusions can look like premises in cause and effect relationships, right? But you need to be able to see that there's a cause-effect relationship in number 7. All right, number 8, we've already seen this, but I'll just go over it with you. The Matterhorn is higher than Mount Whitney, and Mount Whitney is higher than Mount Rainier. Therefore, the conclusion is that the Matterhorn is higher than Mount Rainier. So is it always going to be the case that the Matterhorn is higher than Mount Rainier, given these measurements? And you can look them up. We've looked them up in class before. I'm not going to do that right now, but yes. So now there's a level of necessity here, right? And I want you to take a look and to consider. There's a level of necessity and it concerns measurement. So is this, what type of deductive argument is this? Pause to consider. Yes, it's argument based on mathematics. Arguments based on mathematics also includes not only computations, but notions of measurement, right? I like number 10. Number 10 is good. And we haven't seen this one yet. And the reason I'm going over this homework in a kind of a lengthy way is to kind of try to go over the list and to touch upon all the different varieties of both deductive and inductive arguments. The Wall Street Journal has an article on the new banking regulations. The Financial Times is kind of like the Wall Street Journal. So it's highly respected business and it's a highly respected business publication. In fact, they have this thing in common, right? Therefore, the Financial Times probably also has an article on new banking regulations. Do you see any words to help you to indicate whether this is deduction or induction? Pause to consider. Yes, it has the word probably, so we're dealing with induction. Now, what type of inductive argument is this? Pause to consider. Yeah, it is an actual argument based on analogy, right? The Wall Street Journal is a highly respected business publication. The London Financial Times is a respected business publication. Therefore, if the Wall Street Journal has this article over here, then the Financial Times probably has an article on it too, right? Now, the Wall Street Journal might just be covering a new banking regulation in the America, and the London Financial Times might not cover that day, right? But you're basically just using probability that this thing, because this thing has respected business publication in common with this one over here, it would be the most likely place to find such an article on that same topic. Now, number 11, we haven't seen. We haven't seen an example. Cholesterol is endogenous with humans. Therefore, it's manufactured inside the body. You'll need to look up the word endogenous. Pause to consider. That's right. Endogenous means something is made inside the body. So cholesterol is endogenous with humans. Therefore, cholesterol is manufactured inside the human body. Is that true by necessity? Or is it probability? It is necessity. So, deductive or inductive? Deductive, yes. Now, what type of argument takes the word that applies to the thing and then gives you the definition as the conclusion that this word applies to that thing? Argument from definition, we haven't seen that yet. Okay, number 12, right? We're getting to a point where, yeah, so number 12, we haven't seen this either. Either classical culture originated in Greece or it originated in Egypt. Classical culture did not originate in Egypt, therefore classical culture originated in Greece. So what type of, is there anything here about probability? Or are we thinking a level of necessity? Pause to consider. That's right, there's a level of necessity here, right? So this is disjunctive syllogism and it's deductive. Now, I always pause to help you consider, there is a book by Martin Burnell, right? And it was controversial when it came out. So that's Martin Burnell, but it's called Black Athena, right? Now, I want you just to take a look and know of this book. This syllogism, this example right here, is an example of how in the humanities we have been very Eurocentric. And Martin Bunnell was one of the first to argue that actually a lot of philosophical concepts from Greece originate in Egypt. So I'm pointing to you that if I were to next section, I would say that this is a valid argument pattern, but it's unsound. And I think that you need to know about Martin Bunnell's book because it's in classics, it's kind of, it is now a classic. I mean, it came out like what, 90s or the 80s? When did it come out? I don't know when it was published. Anyway, I'm taking my time away from that, right? But there you go. Number 13, world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking said that the condition of the universe at the instant of the Big Bang was more highly ordered than it is today. In view of Hawking's stature in the scientific community, we should conclude that this description of the universe is correct. I like this version, and we haven't seen this quite yet. So what is it? Pause to consider. Deductive or inductive? What do you think? It is inductive, right? Now, it's inductive because human beings can be wrong. Now, Stephen Hawking was a very accomplished physicist, and so he might be right about the original instance or nanoseconds of the Big Bang, right? And there's different theoretical models in astrophysics and cosmology that demonstrate speculation consistent with empirical data about the Big Bang, et cetera, right? But what type of inductive argument is it? That's right, it's argument from authority, right? So now there's a lot more problems for you to practice. So we've done a few of these, right, now. But just to kind of put your finger on it, you need to be able to look at a passage and say, is this passage deductive or inductive? Does it demonstrate reasoning by probability? Does it demonstrate reasoning by necessity? Right? And you need to be able, you need to sort of form an idea based on the lists that we went over in this section, right? And how those definitions of those different types of inductive arguments apply to the various examples here. We have not done all of them, but we've done probably 85% of them. And so you'll need to see some things. So practice the problems that we didn't do and do the rest of them for homework, right? And that would be 1.3 Roman numeral part 1. Okay, thanks for listening and keep thinking logically.